The 1960s gave us some of the greatest music ever recorded. But not every song that rocked the airwaves back then made it into the classic rock rotation we hear today. Some tracks just slipped through the cracks of time, even though they were everywhere when you were growing up. These are 10 rock songs only those who grew up in the 60s remember. Number 10, Time Won't Let Me, by The Outsiders. If you grew up in Cleveland in 1966, you couldn't escape this song. The Outsiders were local heroes who managed to break nationally with this garage rock anthem that hit number 5 on the Billboard charts. The band formed in 1965, and this was their debut single, recorded when most of the members were still teenagers. What made this track special was its raw energy and that distinctive guitar riff that opened the song. Lead singer Sonny Garachi had a voice that captured teenage frustration perfectly. The production was stripped down compared to what bands like the Beatles were doing at the time, but that roughness gave it authenticity. The song spent 13 weeks on the charts and became a staple of teenage dances across America. Radio stations played it constantly throughout 1966. The Outsiders never quite matched this success again, though they had a few more minor hits. By 1968, Garachi had left to form Climax, leaving the Outsiders to fade from memory. Today, most people under 60 have never heard this song. It doesn't get played on classic rock stations, and it's rarely included in 60s compilation albums. But for those who lived through 1966, hearing those opening chords brings back memories of high school dances and AM radio. Number 9, Incense and Peppermints, by Strawberry Alarm Clock. The summer of 1967 belonged to psychedelic rock, and Strawberry Alarm Clock rode that wave with this kaleidoscopic single. The band formed in Los Angeles in 1967, originally called The Sixpence. They changed their name to something more fitting for the era and released this as their debut single in May 1967. The song hit number 1 in November 1967, knocking out the Beatles' Hello Goodbye from the top spot. That's a remarkable achievement for a band most people today have never heard of. The track featured swirling organ sounds, backwards tape effects, and vocals that seemed to drift in and out like smoke. What's interesting is that the lead vocals weren't even performed by the band's usual singer. A 16-year-old named Greg Munford, who wasn't an official member, sang the verses. The band's regular vocalist, Ed King, only sang the Incense and Peppermints chorus parts. King would later find much greater fame as a guitarist for Lynyrd Skynyrd. The song spent 16 weeks on the charts and sold over 1 million copies. But by 1968, the psychedelic bubble had burst, and Strawberry Alarm Clock couldn't sustain their momentum. They released a few more albums, but none came close to matching this success. The band broke up in 1971, long forgotten by mainstream audiences. Number 8, She's Not There, by the Zombies. Before the Zombies became known for their 1968 masterpiece, Time of the Season, they had this earlier hit in 1964. The band formed in St. Albans, England, in 1961, and this was their very first single, released when keyboardist Rod Argent was just 19 years old. Please don't bother trying to find her. She's not there. The song reached number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100 in 1964. Making it one of the British Invasion's early successes. What set it apart was its jazz-influenced chord progressions and the breathy vocals of Colin Blunstone. The electric piano sound was unusual for rock music at the time, giving the track a sophisticated edge. Argent wrote the song. and it showcased his talent for crafting complex melodies within a pop framework. The middle 8 section featured intricate harmonies that were more ambitious than most rock songs of 1964. The production was clean and precise, showing the influence of producer Ken Jones. Despite this strong debut, the Zombies struggled commercially throughout the mid-60s. They had minor hits, but never achieved consistent success in America until Time of the Season finally broke through in 1969, after the band had already broken up. By then, most people had forgotten about this earlier gem. Number 7. Kicks by Paul Revere and the Raiders. Paul Revere and the Raiders were massive stars in the mid-60s, but you wouldn't know it today. Kicks hit number 4 in 1966 and became an anti-drug anthem during an era when that was still a controversial stance. The band had formed in Idaho in 1958, but they found their stride after moving to Los Angeles in 1965. The song was written by the legendary songwriting team of Barry Mann and Cynthia Weil, who also wrote You've Lost That Lovin' Feelin' and many other hits. They crafted the song specifically as a cautionary tale about seeking artificial highs. The Raiders version featured lead singer Mark Lindsay's powerful vocals and a driving beat that made it perfect for radio. The arrangement was tight and professional, recorded with top session musicians backing the band. The guitar work was crisp, the drums punchy, and Lindsay's voice cut through with clarity and emotion. The production had that mid-60s polish that Columbia Records was known for, clean and radio-ready without sacrificing energy. What made the song significant was its message. In 1966, warning about drug use in a rock song was bold. The counterculture hadn't fully embraced drugs yet, and many teenagers were genuinely curious, but cautious. The song's message resonated, and it became one of the band's biggest hits. Parents appreciated it, which was unusual for rock music at the time. Paul Revere and the Raiders had their own television show, Where the Action Is, which aired daily on ABC from 1965 to 1967. This gave them exposure that few other bands enjoyed. The show filmed at different locations around Southern California, featuring the band performing and introducing other acts. Millions of teenagers rushed home from school to watch it every afternoon. They were regulars on American Bandstand and sold millions of records. Mark Lindsay became a teen idol, with his face on magazine covers across the country. The band wore revolutionary war-inspired costumes, which made them instantly recognizable. Paul Revere himself played keyboards and served as the band's leader and spokesman. The Raiders had a string of hits throughout 1966 and 1967. Songs like Hungry and Good Thing kept them on the charts. They toured constantly, playing to packed houses across America. Their stage show was energetic and professional, honed by years of playing clubs before they hit it big. But by the end of the decade, their clean-cut image seemed dated. The late 60s belonged to heavier, more rebellious bands. Audiences wanted grit and authenticity, and the Raiders' polished presentation felt out of step. Paul Revere and the Raiders kept recording through the 70s, but they never regained their mid-60s prominence. Today, they're largely forgotten outside of Pacific Northwest oldie stations. Number 6. Bus Stop by the Hollies. The Hollies were one of the most successful British invasion bands, yet they're often overlooked today compared to the Beatles, Stones, and Who. Bus Stop hit number 5 in 1966 and showcased the band's trademark vocal harmonies. The Manchester group had formed in 1962 and were already veterans by the time this song came out. Graham Nash wrote the song with Alan Clark, the band's lead singer. The lyrics told a simple story about meeting someone at a bus stop on a rainy day. The narrative was straightforward, but charming, the kind of everyday encounter that could happen to anyone. The production featured a distinctive harpsichord part played on guitar that gave it a Baroque pop sound. The harmonies were intricate, with Nash, Clark, and Tony Hicks blending their voices perfectly. This was one of the things the Hollies did better than almost anyone. Their vocal arrangements were sophisticated without sounding overwrought. Each voice had its place, creating layers of sound that added depth to every chorus. The recording took place at Abbey Road Studios, the same facility where the Beatles worked. The Hollies were perfectionists in the studio, working through multiple takes until they got everything just right. The attention to detail showed in the final product. Every element served the song without overwhelming it. The song spent 12 weeks on the American charts and became one of the band's signature tunes. It was part of the British pop sound that dominated 1966, melodic and carefully crafted. The Hollies had a string of hits throughout the 60s, including Carrie Ann and On a Carousel, but they never achieved the legendary status of their peers. The problem was timing and image. The Hollies were too polished for the emerging counterculture, but too rock-oriented for easy listening audiences. They fell into a middle ground that made them successful, but not iconic. American audiences appreciated their music, but never fully embraced them the way they did the Beatles or the Stones.
That's the way the whole thing started, silly bird.
Graham Nash left the band in 1968 to form Crosby, Stills and Nash, which brought him far more recognition than he ever got with the Hollies. His departure marked the end of an era for the band. The band continued for decades with various lineups, but by the 1970s, they'd largely disappeared from American consciousness. Bus Stop occasionally surfaces on oldie stations, but it's rare. The song deserved better, as did the Hollies themselves. Number 5, Happy Together by the Turtles. The Turtles had one of the most perfect pop songs ever recorded with Happy Together, which hit number 1 in 1967. The band started as a surf rock group in Los Angeles in 1965, but shifted to a more mainstream pop sound. This was their biggest success, spending 3 weeks at the top of the charts. The song was actually written by two songwriters, Gary Bonner and Alan Gordon, who had been trying to sell it for over a year. Multiple artists turned it down before the Turtles recorded it. The rejection list included several major acts who would later regret passing on it. The Turtles recognized its potential immediately and cut their version in late 1966. The arrangement was simple, but effective, with a memorable bass line and that distinctive opening ba-ba-ba-ba-ba vocal hook. The bass part was crucial, driving the entire track with its melodic movement. The drums kept a steady beat that gave the song momentum without overpowering the vocals. Every element worked together seamlessly. Howard Kaylan and Mark Volman shared lead vocal duties, and their voices blended smoothly throughout the track. They'd been singing together since high school and had developed an intuitive sense of how to complement each other. The production was pristine, typical of mid-60s pop. Engineer Bones Howe captured everything with clarity and balance. The song captured the optimistic spirit of 1967, before things got darker later in the decade. It was about simple happiness, being with someone you loved, nothing complicated. That straightforward emotion connected with millions of listeners. It sold over 1 million copies and became a staple of AM radio. The Turtles continued having hits through 1969, including She'd Rather Be With Me and Eleanor. They appeared on television shows and toured constantly. The band developed a reputation as one of the best live acts of the era, energetic and professional. But internal tensions were building, and the music industry was changing. By 1970, they'd broken up. The band owed money to their record label and management, and the members were exhausted from years of constant work. Kaylan and Volman joined Frank Zappa's Mothers of Invention, performing under the names Flo and Eddie, because their former label owned the rights to their real names. They toured with Zappa and brought their vocal harmonies to his experimental music. The Turtles gradually faded from memory, and Happy Together became their only song people remembered, if they remembered them at all. The song lives on in commercials and movie soundtracks, but few people under 50 could name another Turtles song. For those who grew up with them, though, the Turtles represented the best of 60s pop craftsmanship. Number 4. Little Bit of Soul by The Music Explosion. This Ohio band had their moment of glory in 1967, with this infectious single that climbed to number 2 on the Billboard charts. The Music Explosion formed in Mansfield, Ohio in 1966, part of the garage rock scene that was thriving in the Midwest. They were originally called the Scepters, before changing their name. The song featured a driving beat and raw vocals from Jamie Lyons that captured the energy of mid-60s rock and roll. The production was straightforward, no fancy studio tricks, just guitars, drums, and attitude. The horn section added punch to the chorus, making it impossible not to move when you heard it. Little Bit of Soul spent 14 weeks on the charts in 1967 and was everywhere that summer. Teenagers danced to it at beach parties and sock hops. Radio DJs loved it because it was short, punchy, and got listeners excited. The band appeared on television shows like American Bandstand and seemed poised for lasting success. But they couldn't follow it up. Their next few singles barely charted, and by 1969, the Music Explosion had broken up. Lead singer Jamie Lyons tried a solo career that went nowhere. The band is completely forgotten today except by devoted fans of 60s garage rock. But for a few months in 1967, they had one of the most played songs in America. Number 3. Western Union by 5 Americans. Five Americans were from Durant, Oklahoma, and they had a sound that blended rock with country influences. Western Union hit number 5 in 1967 and featured a distinctive guitar riff that mimicked the sound of a telegraph machine. The band had formed in 1962 and went through several name changes before settling on 5 Americans. The song told a story about sending a telegram to an old flame, which was still a common way to communicate urgently in the 60s. Lead singer Mike Rabin delivered the vocals with just the right amount of yearning. The production was clean, with the guitar work carrying most of the melodic weight. The rhythm section kept things simple and steady. Western Union spent 13 weeks on the charts and sold over 1 million copies. It was particularly popular in the Midwest and South, where the band's country rock fusion resonated with listeners. They appeared on Dick Clark's shows and toured constantly throughout 1967. The band had a few more minor hits, including Sound of Love, but nothing matched Western Union. By 1969, they'd broken up. Lead singer Mike Rabin died in 2001, and by then, most people under 50 had never heard of 5 Americans. The song occasionally pops up on oldie stations in Oklahoma and Texas, but it's virtually unknown elsewhere. Number 2. Kind of a Drag by the Buckinghams. Kind of a Drag hit number 1 in early 1967, making them one of the few Chicago bands to top the national charts during that era. The band formed in 1966 and were originally called The Pulsations. The song featured horn arrangements that gave it a fuller sound than most rock tracks of the time. Lead singer Dennis Tufano had a voice that conveyed genuine emotion, and the lyrics dealt with the pain of a failing relationship. The production was sophisticated, showing the influence of producer Dan Belloc. What's remarkable is that Kind of a Drag knocked off I'm a Believer by the Monkees from the #1 spot. It stayed at the top for 2 weeks and spent 12 weeks on the charts total. The Buckinghams became local heroes in Chicago, where they'd already been popular on the club circuit. They followed up with more hits, but by 1970, the band had broken up due to creative differences and label problems. Dennis Tufano pursued a solo career that never took off. Today, the Buckinghams are mostly forgotten outside of Chicago, where oldies stations still play their music occasionally. Number 1. A Little Bit Me, A Little Bit You by the Monkees. Yes, the Monkees are still remembered, but this particular song has faded from memory despite hitting number 2 in 1967. Everyone knows I'm a Believer and Daydream Believer, but this gem gets overlooked. The song was written by Neil Diamond, who was still an up-and-coming songwriter at the time. The track featured Davy Jones on lead vocals, giving it a softer, more British pop feel than some of their other hits. The production was layered and complex, typical of Don Kirshner's approach to the Monkees' early records. The backing track featured top session musicians who were part of the famous Wrecking Crew. A Little Bit Me, A Little Bit You spent 11 weeks on the charts and was the B-side to The Girl I Knew Somewhere. Both songs got radio play, which was unusual. The melody was vintage Neil Diamond, with those soaring chord changes that would later make him famous as a performer. The Monkees were massive stars in 1967, with their television show pulling in 10 million viewers every week. They sold more records that year than the Beatles and the Rolling Stones combined, but their reputation suffered because they didn't play their own instruments on their early records. Critics dismissed them as a manufactured pop group. By 1970, the Monkees had essentially disbanded, though they reunited occasionally in later decades. This particular song got lost among their bigger hits and is rarely played today, but it's a perfect example of mid-60s pop craftsmanship, and hearing it brings back memories of after-school TV and screaming fans. These songs filled the airwaves in the 1960s and were as much a part of that decade as anything by the Beatles or the Stones. They played at school dances, on transistor radios at the beach, and through car speakers on Friday nights. But time moved on, and these tracks got left behind. If you remember these songs, you were there for one of music's greatest decades. You experienced these moments firsthand when they were new and exciting. That makes you part of a generation that witnessed rock and roll history as it happened. If this brought back memories of transistor radios and 45 RPM records, hit that like button and subscribe for more forgotten gems from the decade that changed music forever.